What are some not fun facts? If you show symptoms of rabies, your chances of dying are nearly 100%. But symptoms come like 14 to 21 days after infection, and if you get a rabies shot any time between infection and being symptomatic, your chance of survival jumps to almost 100%. This is why it is important to get rabies shot anytime you are bitten by an animal you don't know, and important to be up to date on your pet's rabies vaccines. Edit, because I keep on getting corrected for visibility. Thanks BTW, the rabies treatment timing depends on a lot of factors. 1. Location of the contact site, bite, scratch, on your body. Shorter to become symptomatic if the contact was closer to the head. 2. It can take years for rabies to become symptomatic, not just weeks or even months. The girl that voiced Ducky in Land Before Time, Judith Barcy, was dead by the time Land Before Time came out. She had been murdered a few months earlier by her father in a double murder-suicide. Her tombstone says yup edit, corrected the spelling on the tombstone. I've already heard her line is yup, so that's how it sticks in my brain. Good ducking lord. She is, incidentally, also Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven, which is her last film, and so was also released posthumously the following year. Konarek Synthesymphone, who had escaped Jeffrey Dahmer, was killed shortly after he was returned to Jeffrey Dahmer's care by police. There is a genetic disorder that causes your body to replace your muscle tissue with bone over time. Edit, for those who are wondering, it's called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, FOP. And currently there is no cure for it. Also, it's a genetic disorder, not a disease. Me apologies for those I confused with it. Edit 2, so I misunderstood, again, it is a disease, just not a contagious disease. Is this disease where eventually you sort of freeze, so at some point you have to decide if you want to be sitting or laying for the rest of your life? Yes. For people with this disease, there comes a time when they have to decide the permanent position of a limb as it slowly begins to freeze in place, knowing they'll never move it out of that position again. I'd have an accusatory finger point. The youngest girl to ever give birth was 5 years, 7 months, and 21 days old. n.wikipedia.org. He was raised believing that Medina was his sister, but he found out at age 10 that she was his mother. I can't imagine what the conversation would have sounded like. If you're going to be murdered, chances are very good you've already met your killer. 93% of humans are dead, and almost all of them were forgotten within 3 generations. Edit, a source. So 7% of humans that ever lived are alive now. That is even scarier. Population growth over the last century or two is pretty wild for the numbers to end up that way. 200 years ago it's estimated there were less than 1 billion people on Earth. 100 years ago it was a bit under 2 billion. 50 years ago it's close to 4 billion, and today we're closing in on 8 billion. The population of China today is almost the same as the population of the entire world in 1900. India's population today is more than the entire world in 1800. The growth in the world population, thanks to our improvements with technology and food management among other things in the last century or two, is staggering. In their Greek mythology origins, centaurs are all males and procreate solely by rape of human females. Oh God, that would mean a human female gives birth to a half-human, half-horse. Oh God. No, half-centaur, so 3/4 human. That's how you breed a quarter horse. You know what they call a quarter horse in France? A horse royale? A horse royale with cheese. Whales and dolphins die by not having enough energy to surface for air, so they slowly sink into the depths of the ocean and suffocate. Edit, as a part Welshman, all these comments about whales made me laugh a lot. Those poor Welsh people. Welsh person, horrid dying last garbles passerby, I think it's about 8:10. In Australia, there is a plant called the gympie, otherwise known as the suicide plant. When touched, it delivers multiple stings with a long-lasting neurotoxin that is so painful that people would rather kill themselves than live through a few days of excruciating pain, and then a further several years of lesser pain, or full reoccurrence in the correct conditions. If the tiny hairs that deliver the stings are not removed, or are buried, the pain will continue for years. The pain, which has been described as feeling like being doused in hot acid and being electrocuted simultaneously, is so bad that people have been driven mad by it. Horses who have been stung by this plant have literally thrown themselves off cliffs. An ex-serviceman named Cyril Bromley is known to have fallen into one of the plants during World War II. Driven mad by it, he had to be strapped to a bed to prevent himself from committing suicide. Another rather unfortunate officer is known to have shot himself in the head after using one of the plant's leaves as toilet paper. Rather than live with the pain in his rear end, he chose to end his life. As the Wikipedia page says, the fruit is edible to humans if the stinging hairs are removed. I can just imagine how that went down. Hey, you know that plant that causes so much pain for the rest of your life that you want to die? I want to eat some of it. Banana republics were coined in the book Cabbages and Kings, about small countries based around single exports that were taken advantage of by large corporations. That company taking advantage of them for the book rebranded and is now called Chiquita. Over 300 people are believed to have jumped from the World Trade Center on 9/11. One of the falling bodies killed a fireman at the scene. On top of that, there are still over 1,000 victims whose remains have not been found. America's first baseball star, Jim Creighton, died at 21 from a rupture he got from hitting a home run. There once lived a man known as Terrar who is known as the hungriest man in history. Despite being average to below average weight, he lived his whole life with a nearly endless, insanely ravenous hunger. He would eat anything and everything he could find. Since his family couldn't accommodate him, he took to the streets where he'd eat all the raw meat, rotting fruit, live rodents, and other small animals he could find. He used this horrific skill to become a street performer where people would give him barrels full of cork, huge baskets of apples, more live animals, and sometimes rocks just to witness him swallow it all with ease. There are other disgusting aspects of Terrar's life that are worth reading about. I think the least fun fact about him is that he was caught several times trying to eat bodies from a hospital morgue. He was also suspected to have consumed a toddler at the same hospital. It's one of the most disgusting yet fascinating stories I've ever read. You forgot to mention, at the autopsy, Terrar's gullet was found to be abnormally wide, and when his jaws were opened, surgeons could see down a broad canal into the stomach. His body was found to be filled with pus, his liver and gallbladder were abnormally large, and his stomach was enormous, covered in ulcers, and filling most of his abdominal cavity. I really would love a solution for whatever the duck this guy was. I know Terry's a disorder that prevents a person from ever feeling full, it's Prader-Willi syndrome, and I assume some of the stories about him are hearsay and exaggerated over time, but it's so fascinating to me. Prader-Willi syndrome. Could be possible that he had it, or something similar. There have been cases where sufferers' stomachs burst from consuming too much. The way he ate, you'd assume that's what he'd die from, but nope. The average human asshole can stretch to about 8 inches, and a raccoon can fit into holes around 4 inches in diameter. This means a raccoon can crawl into your ass. 2 preferably, seeing as there's space and all. Well. 3, really. Assuming 8 refers to diameter and the limiting factor is circumference, then you can fit 3. I spent far longer on the math than I really should have. Brain activity has been recorded for up to 10 minutes after death. What is that person experiencing during those last minutes of life? Easy, you have dinner with any dead friends and relatives, and afterwards they give surreal metaphorical performances before black sludge consumes you all. Male sea otters have forced and violent sex with not only female otters and some pups, but other marine life as well. This often ends in death. Edit, I noticed a lot of questions of whose death occurred during these sexual encounters. The victim is usually the one who dies, as male otters are known to bite and drown their victim as well as having forceful sex. The other marine life usually involved are baby seals and other young pups of other species. I also saw that people mention that they will take part in necrophilia as well. On another note, I did not expect this blow up so much. So thank you for taking the time to reply or upvote. The more you know. Up until the 1980s, babies weren't put on painkillers during surgery. It was believed they didn't feel pain. Man, leaded gasoline and baby torture. What else is there from the mid-20th century that made people go nuts? The Nazi regime, MK Ultra, the Cold War, the Red Scare. Lots of stuff. The Great Molasses Flood, sometimes referred to locally as the Boston Massacre, occurred on January 15, 1919, in the North End neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. 21 people drowned in a wave of hot molasses. Horrible event, but I can't help but to laugh at Boston Massacre.